Up next, the story of a rock and roll juggernaut. This band set the record with the most number 2 hits of the rock and roll era, and they've written many more songs that have become the soundtrack of our lives. We hear them every day. The story of all those next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you love music, truly love it, subscribe below right now so that you never miss an episode of our daily features, the greatest songs and the stories straight from the artist, and check us out on Patreon for even more content. Now from 1967 to 1972, Creedence Clearwater Revival was a juggernaut, pumping out 6 multi-platinum albums and 1 gold record, yielding 10 top 20 pop hits during their 5-year dominance. CCR, or simply Creedence as most ardent fans call them, they set a record for having the most number 2 singles by a group on the Billboard Hot 100. They reached the number 2 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 5 times. And each one of those near chart toppers are mainstays on the list of the most venerable of the rock and roll era. On our series celebrating the greatest number 2 songs of all time, we're going to break down right now for you all 5 of those classic number 2 hits from CCR, including 3 just epic double A-side singles. Now, the inception of Creedence Clearwater Revival began when junior high school buddies John Fogerty, Stu Cook, and Doug Clifford formed an instrumental trio that they called the Blue Velvets. This was in El Cerrito, California. John's older brother joined the gang, and they were signed to Fantasy Records, that was an independent label based in San Francisco. Now, the head of Fantasy Records, a guy named Max Weiss, he requested that they change their moniker from the Blue Velvets to, get this, the Gollywogs. This was a name that Weiss pulled from a children's book. So in 1967, Fantasy Records was purchased by 3-time Academy Award-winning producer Saul Zaentz, and he immediately insisted that the band change their name, which was not a difficult decision since the guys in CCR hated being called the Gollywogs. So in 1968, they became Creedence Clearwater Revival, with John Fogerty, the great John Fogerty, on lead vocals and lead guitar. Tom Fogerty, who was at one time the lead singer, he played rhythm guitar. Stu Cook was on bass, and of course Doug Clifford on drums. CCR broke through with their cover of the Del Hawkins 1957 rockabilly ditty, Susie Q, in 1968, and the CCR onslaught was on. The first in the string of number 2 hits by Creedence was the invigorating double single featuring 2 tracks from their second LP, Bayou Country, Born on the Bayou, and the Wanderlust anthem, Proud Mary. In a 1969 interview, Fogerty said that he wrote Proud Mary in the 2 days after he was discharged from the National Guard, and sometimes in another interview said that it was the very day that he was discharged. Fogerty had been drafted in '66, and he was serving in a reserve unit at Fort Bragg along with Fort Knox and Fort Lee. His discharge papers came in 1967. So he had 3 ideas in mind for a title that he would write lyrics around: Riverboat, Rolling on the River, and Proud Mary. It was based on a washroom maid named Mary. It was CCR bassist Stu Cook who introduced the riverboat imagery of the song. The idea came to him as he and his bandmates were watching the TV show Maverick, and Stu made the statement, "Hey riverboat, blow your bell." John agreed that the boat seemed to have something to do with the song that had been brewing in his mind for quite some time, waiting to take conscious shape. When he wrote the music, he made the first few chords evoke a riverboat paddle wheel going around. Consequently, Proud Mary went from being a cleanup lady to a riverboat. Guitar riffs for Proud Mary, Born in the Bayou, and Keep on Chugglin' were conceived by Fogerty at a concert in the Avalon Ballroom, actually. The passage, Left a Good Job in the City, was written after Fogerty's discharge from the National Guard, like I said. And the line Rolling on the River was taken from a movie by Will Rogers. Traveling down the river, the singer finds protection from the man and salvation from the pains of the working class. Now, in Proud Mary, Fogerty's protagonist learns that you don't need to necessarily make money to make you happy or bring you spiritual fulfillment. In the Macintosh program GarageBand, Fogerty explained that he liked Beethoven's Fifth Symphony and wanted to open a song with a similar intro, descending by a third, implying the way Proud Mary opens with the repeated C chord to A chord. Fogerty wanted to incorporate male gospel harmonies, as exemplified by groups he was familiar with, such as the Swan Silvertones, the Sensational Nightingales, and the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi, especially on the line "Rollin', Rollin', Rollin' on the River," and in the guitar solo where he emulated the Colonel, the nickname, of course, for legendary Stax record guitarist Steve Cropper. Music fans of all genres, of course, have loved Proud Mary. In addition to CCR's revered original, Ike and Tina Turner injected Fogerty's song with a soul revival, an overhaul that produced an incendiary version that performed nearly as well as its predecessor. It peaked at number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. It also hit number 2 on the Billboard R&B chart. That was in 1971. CCR's Proud Mary, Born in the Bayou, the double side, was denied the top spot on the Billboard Hot 100 by 2 songs, actually. First by Everyday People by Sly and the Family Stone, a great song, and then it was leapfrogged by Tommy Roe's Dizzy. Proud Mary was backed by one of CCR's cult classics, Born on the Bayou, a swamp rock flavored track that Fogerty wrote in his small bare-walled apartment. Born on the Bayou was rooted in the Louisiana swamplands. Although Fogerty had never lived in that part of the country, or really spent much time in Louisiana, as I understand it. His vocals, though, are performed with so much conviction, so much authenticity. I mean, you would swear that he was indeed born in the bayou. Born on the Bayou was about a mythical childhood and the adventures experienced during a hot and humid 4th of July. One of the most interesting expressions in the song Born in the Bayou is the line "chasing down a hoodoo." A hoodoo is a magical, mystical, spiritual, non-defined apparition, like a ghost or a shadow that is not necessarily evil, but certainly otherworldly. The use of hoodoo was Fogerty channeling artistry from his appreciation for the music of Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters. Now, as we go into the next 4 songs that hit number 2, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. I wear these things every day, and you should too, because when you go to Zenni.com, you really shop according to the shape of your face, and that way you can ensure that you always have a variety of really amazing and distinctive eyewear that will look great on you. Go to Zenni.com to check it out. Now, next on the CCR number 2 hit parade is John Fogerty's Harbinger, Bad Moon Risin', the lead single from the band's 3rd best-selling album, Green River, from 1969. Bad Moon Risin' was able to ascend even higher in the UK, where it actually reached number 1. Fogerty shared that the song is about the apocalypse that was going to be visited upon us. I see the bad moon arise and I see trouble on the way. I see earthquakes and lightning. I see bad times today. Don't go around tonight. Well, it's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on the rise. Fogerty wrote the lyrics for Bad Moon Rising after watching The Devil and Daniel Webster, a 1936 film adaptation about a farmer who sells his soul to the devil, morphed into human form as a character named Mr. Scratch, and is defended by a renowned local attorney named Daniel Webster. One particular scene in the movie inspired Fogerty as the impetus for Bad Moon Rising.
I'm glad of the rain, the storm, and the hail.
Fogerty absorbed a scene in the film where a hurricane destroys most of the central town in the movie, and the calamity triggered his second verse. I hear hurricanes a blowin'. I know the end is coming soon.
I know the end is coming soon.
I fear rivers overflowing. I hear the voice of rage and ruin. To me, the captivating arrangement of Bad Moon Rising, it's like a cross between Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan, and a traditional folk hymn. Perhaps more of the latter, since the traditional folk and gospel genre and the hymns influenced Cash and Dylan as well as John Fogerty. The song has been placed in many TV shows and a number of films, but the melodic structure of Bad Moon Rising, I think it's because it's created a contradiction in pop culture. The bouncy beat of the song, along with its menacing lyrics, made it an anthem, actually, in competitive sports, especially in international soccer matches, American football contests. Fogerty admitted in his memoirs that he borrowed a riff from Elvis Presley's guitarist Scotty Moore on the track I'm Left, You're Right, She's Gone. Well, you tried to tell me so. John called it honoring Moore's lick, and he's never tried to hide it. It's actually been reported that Scotty Moore grabbed Fogerty backstage at an awards ceremony, I think it was in the 80s, and jokingly said to Fogerty, "Give me back my licks."
Well, take me back down the cool water.
John Fogerty wrote a song that was inspired by one of his favorite childhood vacation spots, an area called Puda Creek, located near Winters, California. Puda Creek was an annual pilgrimage for the Fogerty family until John was about 10 years old. It was the creek where he learned how to swim. Fogerty changed the name of the spot to Green River and gave the tune a backwoods Bayou vibe. It was the title track from CCR's Green River album and the second single release from the record, peaking at number 2 in the summer of 1969. Summer of 69. Fogerty chose Green River for the song and the album title from another warm memory from his days as a young boy. John fondly remembered how he and his friends and his family used to buy flavored syrup to add to a soda beverage. John's favorite was the lime-flavored Green River syrup. Green River the soda. I used to drink that all the time. It's only 2.5 minutes long, the song, but it has such an infectious, feel-good Creedence groove. It just leaves you begging for more. I remember growing up, my dad was always playing CCR. Sometimes, I'd go to work with him. And my favorite part of that was riding in his old pickup, and we'd stop at the old gas station in our town. He'd let me pick out a soda, sometimes a comic book, And one time I got a Green River soda, and I remember he told me the story of the song Green River, and he blasted CCR the rest of the day.
Come on to Green River.
He'd always play it when he'd take me to my Little League games during those summers in the 80s. It was just such a great memory. Now, setting up the excitement for CCR's all-time best-selling album, Cosmo's Factory, was the powerful 1-2 punch of Travelin band backed with Who'll Stop the Rain that fell just short of the top of the Billboard Hot 100 in 1970. A strong contender for the most potent double A-side single released by any act of the rock era. It was 2-track treasures for the price of one. Travelin Band is a Fogerty penned rouser that pays homage to Little Richard, who was a major influence on Fogerty's powerful vocal style. And you can definitely hear it for sure in the song. The song gives us a taste of a rock band's hectic life on the road, flying across the land, trying to get a hand, catching midnight rides, losing baggage along the way, always on the move. That's the way it is when you're playing in a traveling band.
Come on, won't you get me to my room? I won't move. Hey.
One of the greatest voices ever. Fogerty's rugged soulfulness is at its peak. On CCR's dynamic number 3 hit Fortunate Son for sure from 69. And on his fiery R&B assault unleashed on CCR's Travelin Band. Two of his best vocals for sure. Fogerty belting out the opening line, 737 coming out of the sky, is a burst of sonic energy that just jolts the body, like the boom of the Boeing 737 jet Fogerty is singing about that lifts off the swift thrill ride of Travelin' Band.
737 coming out of the sky. Oh, won't you take me down to Memphis?
Now, the flip side of Travelin' Band was the softer, acoustic reflection, Who Will Stop the Rain. This Fogerty composition depicts the social and political atmosphere at the end of the 60s and the onset of the 70s.
Still I wonder who'll stop the rain.
John wrote about failed policies and the lies coming from the White House about ending the Vietnam War. In verse 2, I went down Virginia seeking shelter from the storm. Caught up in the fable, I watched the tower grow. 5-year plans and new deals wrapped in golden chains. And I wonder, still I wonder, who will stop the rain?
5-year plans and new deals wrapped.
And about the experience that he and his bandmates had while performing at Woodstock, that's actually captured in verse 3. Heard the singers playing, how we cheered for more. The crowd had rushed together, trying to keep warm. Still the rain kept pouring, falling on my ears. Who Will Stop the Rain is beautifully crafted in a somber, reflective tone that likely shares the way Fogerty and his then wife felt when he was playing the mastered version of the song on a home stereo. And after the song finished, his son Josh, who was just 4 years old at the time, he looked up at his father and said, "Daddy, stop the rain." I love that story. The song was used as the theme and the title to Who Will Stop the Rain, a 1978 motion picture about the trials of a Vietnam veteran starring Nick Nolte. And literature professor Craig Werner, who is also a member of the nominating committee of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, he called Who Will Stop the Rain one of the best blues songs written about Vietnam. No doubt about it. And no doubt it was an influence on a young Bruce Springsteen, who covers it in concert quite a lot through his career. The fifth and final number 2 single by Creedence Clearwater Revival was Looking Out My Back Door. The B-side was Long As I Can See the Light. Amazing. Although it was stymied for the top of the pop chart, Looking Out My Back Door climbed all the way to number 1 in Australia, Austria, Canada, Norway, and Sweden. It ended up being one of CCR's biggest international hits. The song's lyrics, filled with, colorful, dreamlike imagery, led some to believe that the song is about drugs. Those that subscribed to the drug theory pointed to the flying spoon as a reference to a cocaine or heroin spoon, and the crazy animal images in the song reenacted as an acid trip. Fogerty, however, has stated in many interviews that the song was actually written for his then 3-year-old son Josh, who was a lovable muse for many of Fogerty's lyricism. The pundits speculating on the meaning behind the lyric of Looking Out My Back Door hearken the controversy of the Beatles' Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, a track that, of course, also notoriously labeled as a drug song. In addition to a flying spoon, Looking Out My Back Door also speaks of giants doing cartwheels, a statue wearing high heels, tambourines and elephants, and happy creatures dancing on the lawn. According to Fogerty, though, each of those fantasy images are the conjuring of a child's wild imagination, not the effects of a hallucinogen. John has also revealed that the reference to a parade passing by was actually inspired by the Dr. Seuss book And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street. Country legend Buck Owens is actually honored in Looking Out My Back Door. There's an endearing homage to Buck and the Bakersfield sound of the 50s and 60s throughout the song's musical structure. Now, Looking Out My Back Door was used in a really cool scene in the dark comedy The Big Lebowski. In America, Long As I Can See the Light was released as a double-sided single with Looking Out My Back Door as the focal A-side for radio, As a B-side, the track did receive respectable airplay at AM and FM radio in the States. It peaked at number 57 on the Billboard Hot 100. I love Long As I Can See the Light, one of my favorites. In the UK, Long As I Can See the Light was placed on the A-side of the super single. Looking Out My Back Door is a B-side. Fogerty delivered just such a tender vocal on Long As I Can See the Light.
Long as I see the light.
When he was scripting the song, I guess John surprised himself by coming up with a candle as a metaphor symbolizing a beacon that would guide him home. Fogerty was a rough and tumble guy for the most part, but on Long As I Can See the Light, he was uncharacteristically vulnerable. Long As I Can See the Light is about the loner in John Fogerty, expressing his desire to feel understood and needing loved ones to shine a light so that he will, make his way back. On the recorded version, Fogerty plays electric piano and a sax solo, in addition to filling his usual lead in the vocalist role. 5 number 2 singles, there they are, as well as a couple of the finest double A-sides of the rock and roll era. And we didn't even touch down on the corner Unfortunate Son that went to number 3. And that's a surefire candidate for the best double A-side ever, maybe up against the Beatles or the Beach Boys.
Down on the corner, out in the street.
We didn't even cover Up Around the Bend. Have you ever seen The Rain?
No, have you ever seen the rain?
We'll definitely be covering those songs and this legendary band again in the future. Like I said, this band they're very personal to me. It was a bond that I shared with my father, who, he's passed away nearly 2 years ago now. It's just that perfect gravel in Fogerty's voice that it takes me back to those hot summer days in the small suburbs of this small town, Moreland, Idaho, where I grew up with my dad. The smell of freshly cut lawns, the sweet taste of a cold Pepsi and a greasy burger at the local joint after winning a Little League game with my dad as our coach. Those CCR songs are still so resonant, so powerful and potent that even though my dad's no longer here, his memory definitely lives on within those songs. They're just like a time machine that can always transport me right back to those joyous moments. That's what great music does. Thanks to John Fogerty and Creedence Clearwater Revival, we truly are fortunate sons. Leave us a comment about John Fogerty and CCR. What are their best cuts? What do you think they are? What are your memories that are tied to them? Tell us in the comments. If you like our content, we do invite you to be a permanent part of our community. We'd love to have you. To get CCR's greatest music, click on our links below. Check us out on Patreon to help us curate more content, more videos. Help us to keep the music alive. It's really important. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Stay safe out there.